Oh man, I just wrote the best song. I'm feeling so good. I wrote the song in the persona of an insane person. I noticed that my microwave in my kitchen says one time and the stove says another. So I wrote this whole song about pacing along an interdimensional rip between times. And titled it An Insane Rant. And it's like 3 minutes long, which is long for my songs. And it makes me laugh so much. And I like it. It's going to be hard to memorize, though, because it's just this propulsive rush of words. Glad I've got it recorded. I have to write it down. It's probably going to be used as evidence in some trial against me. See, he is not of sound mind. Always a risk with art. Look what this guy confessed to in his memoir. Everything. I've lived some of the Wild Bunch terrain. I've gone all over, and I've read about Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch so much. I can relate to him because he was a Jack Mormon. He left. I'm an ex-Mormon. But having been raised in that stuff. But he was smart. He said murder was the result of poor planning. And if you watch the movie, which is a very good movie, though I hesitate to endorse it because it used animal cruelty in making it. Weirdly, my son would later date someone from a family that made its wealth from doing the animal handling on that movie. What? I swear I'm in the Matrix. Like too much connective tissue. Like if we were a big story written by game designers or some higher versions of ourselves, I'd say, little on the nose there, buddy. A lot of references, pretty heavy-handed. Everything connects to everything else. Come on, get real. But Pearl Baker always thought he came back and didn't die in South America and wrote about that and claimed that the town went out and met him and so on. I've been to many of the sites like Robert's Roost that were important there and canoed very close to there on the Dirty Devil River, flooded. I think I've heard somewhere that the Sundance Kid's role was sometimes overstated. All I know is any story that gets you out into the Red Rock desert wilderness of the Colorado Plateau is a blessed tale. If it catches your interest, follow that interest. One time I got really into inscriptions from this old rancher, Llewellyn Davis, back in the day. And I went, because he would carve his name on arches all over southern Utah. And so collecting all his inscriptions, I got really into this book called Rock Art of the Colorado Plateau, or Inscriptions of the Colorado Plateau. Very good. Started collecting them. They only get so old, like the trappers of the 1830s. That's how I got into graffiti. I was really into historic inscriptions. And then I was like, why are these modern things I see written around less meaningful? The posse that followed the Wild Bunch. It's so interesting in the movie. The posse is always on the edge of the screen, and the Wild Bunch is always in the center. George Miller would be proud. It's a great, cool film the way it is put together. But they went down to Mexico specifically so they could film these scenes where they kick out the back legs of a mule, and it's really painful for the animal. And that's messed up. They went to a different location just so they could do animal cruelty. I have no respect for that. I'll probably continue to watch the movie because it is kind of a masterpiece. But I won't watch it in any way that gives anybody any money on it. Maybe. I don't know. I don't want to watch it when I think about that scene, but it is such a well-written movie. It's a script from the same guy that did The Princess Bride. What's his name? William Goldman? I'm so interested in dreams. I don't know what take this has. But I've written 2 essays that are analyzing my dreams from a period of time. In 1999 and 2000, I wrote down all the dreams I had during a trip around Lake Powell, a 7-month canoe trip that I mentioned before. And then years later, I was able to look at them all and analyze them. Like, wow, you dream of your parents' house a lot. You must still be connected to home, but it's always presented in different formats. And the church you grew up in appears increasingly culty in your dreams. And you often see multiple places conflated at once, multiple ages of life conflated at once. What does that say about you? More recently, I wrote down all my dreams during August of 2024 and analyzed them in real time in one of my real-time essays that I write every 25 months. I'm in the middle of a 25-year project called A Quarter Century Year. And that means every 25 months, starting in April of 2016, I write an essay about that month during that month, so that after 25 years, I'll have 12 essays for 12 months, and it'll be a quarter century year. And you'll see all this time passing, because 25 months is long enough for things to change between entries. And they're always really like artful in how I write them. I like play with form and so on. And each one is kind of becomes its own project. But I did one in April of 2016, May of 2018, June of 2020, July of 2022, and August of 2024. And next will be September 2026. But anyway, dreams, man. Cue the Roy Orbison song, In Dreams. I love that song. I have not read this follow-up to Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, but when I was hitchhiking back in the day, and I was hitchhiking from Alaska down to my sister's house in Utah, I got a ride somewhere in America with this guy who was like, I think it was like before I got to my uncle's place in Montana. And he was like a hot spring tourist, basically. He just went around to all the springs and he was like, you could go with me, man. I could teach you how to make jewelry and like, you could be part of my like traveling tribe. And I was like, that sounds intriguing, but I had just been living on the road for so long and I was just like kind of generally hungry all the time and just was like, ugh, so done with this. I would not be doing this if I had any money. I would be traveling in style. But, you know, I guess that's when you become a real traveler. A traveler in need is a traveler indeed. Someone once told me and I was like, yes, thank you. But, you know, anyway, that guy was playing the audiobook of this in his vehicle and it was interesting to hear. I was very influenced by the first book. It's a very thoughtful, philosophical book. My friend Danny was really influenced by it. He's writing a book about biking with a trailer across the country with dogs. That's very Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's going to be good. Danny Alverson. He's a good writer. More dreams. People are like, this guy's some hippie new ager. Well, that's like an aspect of me, but it's not all of me. And I don't believe any of that stuff overall. I also see symbolism in poetry and everything. You know, and knowing cool stuff like this and ways that people interpret things and what symbols mean. Anything you can know about symbols is good. Wish I hadn't given away this one book I had. It's just lists of symbols. You know, Alan Watts is so great. I love in the movie Her that an AI replication of Alan Watts based on all his writings becomes part of a carbon nanocloud that takes off through the universe with much of humanity and the other, not humanity, the phone, the intelligences that are in these phones. That's a good sci-fi movie, Her. Alan Watts, Cloud Hidden Whereabouts Unknown, a Mountain Journal. He's just a really thoughtful dude. He's like a hippie Carl Sagan. Look up some clips from him on YouTube and you'll be like, yes, what a charming fellow. I would sit by the campfire he was sitting by and we'd chat and I'd hear some wise stuff. The Awakening of Intelligence by J. Krishnamurti. This looks like it might be a religious text, but I'm very intrigued. It's also about consciousness and so on. I'd check it out. I'm honestly not clear on what kind of book this even is. Some part of me thought to save it. Oh yeah, cool. Langston Hughes and African Treasury. What is Africa like today? Mayabuye Africa. Long live Africa. Come back Africa. Articles, miscellaneous, essays, stories, poetry. Hey, this is cool. So this could go in the fiction section because it has stories and poetry, but it also has nonfiction. I could treat the nonfiction stuff as like an introduction and then move this over to that case so I can read it. Yes. All right. Uses of the past. Profiles of former societies. Well, this sounds fascinating. Pretty good cover. I like that. Man's heritage. Say humankind, you know. Sounds better. What do you got there? Bound for Glory. I've seen that movie too. It's pretty good. But I had a copy of this a long time ago. This is another copy. I was such an impressionable youth, and I sure loved when I found folk music and stuff. Darwin Century by Lauren Isley. Hey, look who turned up again. You rascal. Evolution and the Men Who Discovered It. Hey, cool. And a beautiful, beautiful paperback. Wow. Yeah. I once came up with the idea of like a mini parade where like everybody made a float for their own thing. They just turned their car into it and it would be like a real low budget funny thing and the whole city could do it. It'd be a great idea. But some books, I'm like, the design is so good, I would have them for that. But I don't think I'd waste my mini parade float on one I just like the design of. It had to be a book I liked too. I think what inspired that idea was that song, Everyday People. I'm like, this song is so good. I want to have a little mini parade for it. So great. Sly and the Family Stone. Oh, here's another unusual little visual book by this fellow, Marshall McLuhan, with Quentin Fiore. War and Peace in the Global Village. Beautiful book. Look at this thing. Dang. What? Yeah, pretty good. And like, I'm sure it's super visual. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, this looks epic and good. Global Village. Globe bulbs make my head spin by the time I look at the place they changed. Whoa, 1968. How about that? Well, I'll read that. I read The Medium as the Message, and it was at least an enjoyable experience. I got some things out of it. But the whole time I was thinking, wait till they get a load of right now. Like, I mean, because he's all, it's crazy. Imagery has gotten out of control. I'm like, you have no idea. 10 years from now, kids are just going to be staring at like pulsing lights that occasionally have images in them. It's just going to be, well, will culture even exist? It'll just be hook your brain up to like a neural network that hits all the dopamine spots. Have a song exactly crafted for your brainwaves right this moment. Isn't that perfect and relaxing? No humans involved. I don't know, I hope that doesn't happen. But what if you could just make a perfect AI movie that's for like you exactly? You know, Alexa, make a movie that's perfectly tailored for my brain. It's exactly what I need to watch right now and will make me feel amazing. Okay. There could be some real strange moments that happen with AI. I hope there will always be human-made art too, you know? All sorts of dumb stuff. It is human-made art because humans made AI. It's the same thing. Is it? You know, this is a really striking book. I read this once. Not a copy that looked like this, but this book. Steinbeck. He traveled with a dog. It was like a French poodle. Kind of a very uncinematic dog. Unpicturesque. Weird looking dog for his like kind of salt of the earth type journey he took. Living in the camper of a truck, but whatever. He loves his dog. And it was interesting. This is like late life Steinbeck, and he's way nonfiction. And he visits schools when they're desegregating, and like the National Guard's out protecting Ruby Bridges or whoever it was. Yeah. One chapter that stayed with me is he finds a bunch of trash from a previous guest of a hotel room, and he kind of pieces together their life and what happened there, and it's very interesting. Found magazine quoted it once. I was happy to see that because I like that part. But Steinbeck's great, you know. One of those authors that's going to go in and out of favor over time, but let's never forget he was a stand-up fella who cared about justice and what's right, and tried to use his writing as a platform and was a good writer. And 3 cheers for old Steinbeck, I say. Hip, hip, hooray. Hip, hip, hooray. Hip, hip, hooray. And then we toss him on our shoulders. We carry him around the room. And, you know, he deserves that. 60 years old in search of mystery. This is like travel writing, but it's travel writing by a great literary voice, so that's pretty cool. I think sometimes I've noticed great artists like Werner Herzog, they pull back from fiction as their career goes on, and they kind of contextualize their fiction within their nonfiction. Like Werner Herzog is more of a documentarian now than a feature fictional filmmaker. He hasn't done that sort of thing in a long time for the most part that I know of. But that means Werner Herzog, the filmmaker, exists within all these documentaries, and so all those films kind of exist within that cinematic universe. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes he really even betrays that the documentaries are artificial, like he'll let boom mic slip in and just, it's like, well, it's the best shot other than that for other reasons. I find it very interesting. Good old Steinbeck. I'm so taken by the story of Shackleton. Their ship freezes in the South Pole ice, and they do this insane boat and overland trip to get help over huge amounts of time. I forget how much, so much time. And it's a wild story with so many interesting elements. I've been watching documentaries about that expedition my whole life and reading books. Very interesting. I'm sure I read this a long time ago. Kind of remember it. But I've heard so many versions of it, they all kind of blur. This, I believe, is a World War I memoir. Or some other. The end of his innocence and the end of the innocence of his world. Well, this is a beautiful book. Look at this thing. Look at that. Look at those colors. Dang. I love it. Oh, that's so great. Penguin. You know, I love all these companies. They're fantastic. Like, they brought so much, like, wonder and goodness into my life. Nietzsche. Good old Nietzsche. I've got one copy of this in the fiction paperback section and one copy in the nonfiction paperback section, because I think it kind of exists there. It's a fictional example illustrating nonfiction ideas. This is appropriate. And look at that great cover. You want to win me over? Put some clouds on there. I'll be like, that's a good cover. Okay, Jung, huh? Cool. I'll read this sometime. It's not too long. Learn some biz about the brain. Emerson. Big influence on me. I've always grown up around Emerson. There used to be so many Emerson books in my house. I've read a lot of Emerson in my life. When I was in Alaska, I had such an Emerson kick. My roommate, Ray, hated it. He's like, stop quoting Emerson. I'm like, Ray, I gotta quote Emerson. He's amazing. Look at this beautiful book. What? That is an objet d'art. It's pretty. It's really pretty. And I like looking at it. Looking at it. And looking at it. It was in high school when I read a collection of Emerson's essays that I first thought, you know what would be a cool idea for a book? A collection of essays told by a whole neighborhood where everybody in the neighborhood had a different form telling their story, and they were all essays. And that was like the kernel of my later nonfiction book, but it was applied to a fiction book, and it traces back to Emerson. I mean, when you read, you never know how what you're going to read will affect you, what ideas it'll give you. It's pretty cool. And the more you do it, I feel like the more you're going to be immersed into that creative milieu, that world, the swirl of information and ideas that is a reading life, you know. It's so good. This is a book I'm really glad I own. This is from a Sao Paulo, Brazil beggar woman who wrote it on scraps of trash. I mean, what? Child of the Dark. Written on scraps of paper picked from gutters, this is the raw, primitive journal of a street scavenger, Caroline Maria de Jesus, who fought daily for survival for herself and her 3 illegitimate children. Hey, why'd you have to say illegitimate? In a squalid Brazilian favela, a human garbage dump, home of the poor, the hungry, the desperate. I watched this brutal documentary called Favela Rising, and it was partly about this family of kids that lived with no adults in the woods, and you thought they would have bonded together and been like the Boxcar Children or something, but they were just vicious and mean to each other, and they were all growing up so hard, and it was sad. They finally got rescued by people associated with the documentary, but I'm sure some damage was done. One of the most astonishing documents of the lower depths ever printed, Newsweek. I mean, yeah, sometimes you encounter art or just somebody, a personage that is just electric from how far out of the normal spectrum of things they are. They've gone to the darkest darks and are crackling with its aura. It doesn't mean sinister necessarily. It means deprivation and suffering. I bet this book is powerful. I know I've skimmed it. I will read it sometime. Manifest Destiny and Mission in American History. Well, I'm sure this book's really interesting. A reinterpretation by Frederick Merck. Nice looking book. Was Manifest Destiny a true expression of our national spirit? Answering this question. Well, you know, it's good to answer these questions, ask these questions, you know. Think about things. A lot of people just walk around living the unexamined life, taking everything for granted. How did we get here, you know? I'm just going to finish the shelf because it's like, you know, why not? The luck factor. Good luck can be yours if you know how to get it. Put it to work in your life today. Next contact. I'm studying luck for some reason. I was interested in it. I mean, I've had lucky times in my life. My second wife and I would always talk about how our meeting was like this weird cascade of luck. Like both of us almost didn't go to this show that she was playing at and that I was in the audience of. And we both felt super, super lucky and like knew we were going to meet somebody really important. And we just like met right away and we're like, hey, what's up? Like connected across the room. It was really something wild and special. So it made me wonder about luck for a long time after that. Like that was real. Something happened there. I don't know. I'll read about anything. I'm not threatened by weird information. It's just provocative. At worst, I'll increase my store of metaphors, you know. Here's another beautiful May Sarton book, Plant Dreaming Deep. Please tell me this is actually about what plants experience. I would love to read that. Oh, it's about a house. House in a garden. Woman living alone, working as a writer. This could be beautiful. I like to read. Norton. Go Norton. Me and Peter Jenkins have a history. This guy kind of shaped my life a little bit. I read his National Geographic articles and watched TV specials about him when I was a kid, and my mom was like, "Isn't that cool?" And I agreed, it was. And it intrigued me, and stuff like that was kind of in the air in the 80s. Like there was Hands Across America, as depicted in the Jordan Peele movie Us. I was a part of that. And so everyone in the whole country is standing out in a chain, holding hands in a long line. That's amazing. It's kind of a wild stunt still. But anyway, walking long distance hikes were kind of a popular thing. Peace Pilgrim, other people, this guy, were doing these long hikes, and it was kind of a cool, interesting sort of countercultural alternate patriotism, looking at the country up close and trying to understand it and stitch it together. And anyway, years later, when I was a young hippie in Alaska hitchhiking with a hippie girlfriend, like 19 or 20, this guy picked us up. I may have mentioned this in another video. I think I did. And yeah, because I have those National Geographics that his writings were in. He picked me up. He was in Alaska writing a book, and my girlfriend, he was writing a book called Looking for Alaska. And he didn't mention us. I think he was annoyed that we were both from different religious backgrounds. He's like, "That's a messy story." Maybe. I don't know. Or that I thought Chris McCandless was awesome. He was like, Chris McCandless was a fool. Something like that. No, he just didn't respect Chris McCandless. And, you know, I think Chris McCandless is pretty awesome. The nonfiction figure at the center of Into the Wild. I think anybody can die, you know. I think he set a beautiful example and he lived boldly. I wish he hadn't made some of the mistakes he made, but I don't blame him. After you read his sister's memoir, you know that he got away from his parents for reasons. But anyway, I was hanging out with Peter Jenkins and his then new wife, and we went to this car dealership near Anchorage, Alaska, and he bought a new car, and we like sat with him and hung out with him. What? And then later I picked up this book from a free pile in like Montana. I wrote in this. Peter Jenkins and his second wife were in Alaska living in Seward while he researched another book. They gave my dog, my girlfriend, and I a ride from Seward to a blues festival in Anchorage. That's when he told me about this book and about his experience with the drunken Shelby 4. We waited in a fenced-in car lot while he signed the papers on a brand new Explorer. I think that was April 1999. My goodness. I guess I used to do this. Why did I do that? I would write in the back of every book what my experience with the book was. I'm a freak, that's why. The Diary of Che Guevara. He's a super interesting figure. You know? I'm kind of for the people. Bella Ciao, I stand and sing. I hear this is very good. Is this different than the Motorcycle Diaries? Like, are those included here, I wonder? Oh my gosh, look at this. Strangers in the Land, Patterns of American Nativism, 1860 to 1925 by Johnny Gum. Beautiful book. Look at that thing. Artifact. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on. That's great. Well, I want to read this. You know, it's just cool to read about big topics like that. Yeah, what's the deal with American attitudes? Do people get more or less racist? What's going on? How does Yeah, I bet this is full of cool thoughts. Good old nonfiction. This is about a really interesting bit of treasure lore in the Superstition Mountains of Arizona, near where I grew up. And my dad was like obsessed with it briefly and would like fly a small plane all around there looking for the shadow of Weaver's Needle and trying to find the treasure. My dad could be a pretty eccentric, interesting guy. And yeah. Anyway, that's a beautiful, amazing area. You can see it in the movie U-Turn by Oliver Stone. In many movies, actually. Treasure. Shelf of pure gold. My dad saw a Gila monster when he was out there, and he's like, I knew it before I had to go back. I had to get a gun. Oh my gosh, other times. This concludes the nonfiction paperback case. However, there is a small overflow shelf. That's probably 2 or 3 videos. Nonfiction paperback overflow. All right, that's coming up, folks. Hope everyone's doing great. I don't know how I'm gonna survive this crazy world. I mean, everything's great. Life is good. Books, right? Ha ha ha. That's all that matters. It's just books.